Our special guests today, Ms. Samantha Atkunda Kakuru, Mr. Harold Obiga, Mr. Alad Rakakoko, the Vice President, Uganda Law Society, Mr. Asimwe Anthony, the Treasurer, Mr. Isiko Arthur, Mr. Emmanuel Egariat, Northern Representative, Mr. Edina Ngulu, our Eastern Representative, Mr. Samuel Muhomza, our Western Representative, all members of Uganda Law Society joining us physically and online, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Apio Afra. I am the head rule of law at the Uganda Law Society. I warmly welcome you to this 12th series of the Rnblive weekly press and public engagement, where we discuss and raise public awareness about topical issues. We appreciate your presence and commitment to these important discussions. Today, we'll be discussing two topics. The first one is Flood City, the quest for justice, that will be moderated by our treasurer, Mr. Isiko Arthur. The second issue will be Beyond Umeme, what is next, that will be moderated by Mr. I beg your pardon. Flood City will be moderated by Mr. Eddie Nangulu, and Beyond Umeme will be moderated by Mr. Isiko Arthur. Regarding our first issue, that is the Flood City, the quest for justice. Last Wednesday, 26th March 2025, Kampala woke up to a heavy downpour that led to the flooding of several parts of the city. 7 people are reported to have died, including 2 children that tragically drowned in their home, which had flooded. The roads were impassable, with motor accidents reported, and there was significant property damage. This is not the first time the city has faced flooding. Whenever the rainy season starts, there are lives lost and properties destroyed. There is a public outcry for a permanent solution to the floods in Kampala. We are joined by 2 distinguished speakers to provide guidance on how we can move forward to address this challenge. That is Ms. Samantha Atkunda Kakuru Mwesigwa and Honorable Elias Nalukula. Then Beyond Umeme, what is next? Umeme had a 20-year power distribution concession with the government of Uganda, which ended in March 20th, March 2025. On 1st April 2025, Uganda Electricity Distribution Company took over electricity distribution infrastructure in Uganda. There have been reports of clashes over the government's payout for Umeme. There has also been a lot of public fear in regards to whether this transition will cause a change in the tariff charges or load shedding and constant power blackouts. To address these concerns and give more insight, we are joined by Mr. Alan Rakakoko and Mr. Alan Obiga. Therefore, we look forward to a fruitful, engaging discussion. Once again, thank you all for being part of this conversation. I now invite the Vice President, Mr. Asimwe Anthony, to address us. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Afra, our head rule of law department. The council members present, our esteemed guests, members online, those who are here physically, Fourth Estate, members of the press. A good morning to you all. Let me take this opportunity to first appreciate the Secretariat for the good work. This is the 12th Rnblive event, and I would like, on behalf of Council, to congratulate you for keeping the fire burning. We know it is a new area. It is something that was well thought out for the benefit of the public. And the fact that we've managed to make the 12th and still running, we really do commend you for the commitment and the good work for whatever you're doing. Now, most of you must be wondering why I'm dressed like this, and some members of of council who are here. Yesterday, as the Uganda Society, we joined the Uganda Kingdom to support the cause, the Kabaka Run, the Kabaka Birthday Run 2025, which will take place on Sunday, that is the 6th, this Sunday. And it's basically for raising funds in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Most of you are aware that in the recent past, we've had USAID cut. Most of the support was coming from USAID. And that means right now we have to look for ways of sustaining that fight ourselves. The Uganda Kingdom and the Kabaka have championed this cause. The Kabaka is an ambassador for ending the spread of HIV/AIDS, an international ambassador, USAID. We felt as the Uganda Society, it is our duty, it is important that we take part in this cause because we cannot leave it for other people. We need to look for ways. I was telling my colleagues how I know a relative who was working with TASO. I received a call 2 days ago that they're now, they're seated, they're not working, the offices are closed. And you can imagine the number of people who are getting that kind of support. So some of these initiatives are important. As the Uganda Society, we did pledge that we shall encourage members to take part. So I do call upon ULS members of the public, to please buy these kits and take part, register and take part in the Kabaka Birthday Run because it's for a good cause. It is an awareness campaign for the fight against the HIV/AIDS. And as the society, we did purchase 100 kits. So for those members who are able to come to the secretariat or send representatives, please come and pick a kit. The first 100 members will get a kit for free, which has already been paid for by the society. But should you fail to get one, a free one, please don't hesitate to buy. It's only 20,000, it's not a lot of money. You can still buy a kit, you're supporting the good cause. So we do call upon members to come and participate in this cause. Again, I did begin by congratulating the Secretariat, the Rule of Law Department, and the entire team here for the good work as far as Rnblive is concerned. The reason we did come up with this particular initiative is for social justice. It doesn't mean that every case, every issue has to end from court. It has to go to court. There are certain aspects that affect each and every member of the community. It doesn't matter who you are. I remember seeing an interesting picture where a person was carrying a police officer to cross the floods. I also saw one where a government vehicle, a V8 to be more particular, was stuck in a trench due to the floods. Now, some of these issues affect everyone. So we do call upon the members of the public. We've received some petitions. We've seen people have come here to address us. They've approached the ULS. We have a mandate under Section 3 E and D of the ULS Act. We need to be relevant to the members of the public. So we call upon members of the public. ULS is not just for lawyers. It's for every other member of the public who is seeking social justice, who is seeking any kind, any form of justice and support. So please take advantage of this initiative of Rnblive, because this is where we discuss issues that affect every member of the public, the legal issues and other issues to do with social justice. So I do implore members of the public to take this opportunity and approach. The Radical New Buy is here to voice, your needs and to speak up and ensure that justice is served. We do not only want to speak about it, but we also take action depending on the petition or the kind of request. Now, in a special way, allow me to recognize our regional representatives on council. We have Mr. Egaru Omiat, who is the man has traveled all the way from the north to come and be with us. He has always attended online, but we are lucky to have him here for the first time today. So today is a special day. So I have members of council. We also have Council Eddie Nangulu. Unlike Mr. Omiat, it's not his first time. We've had him here before. The man from the east, where the wise men come from. It is also a special moment that we have you here today because I know you've always attended online and employed your members in the regions to attend online, but it's important that we have the physical engagement. Also, Sam is on the way. He comes from the Western. He's the representative to the Western members on council. He just communicated that he's about to reach. But today is a special day. It's a special Rnblive where we have all these members here with us physically to do what we do best. So you're welcome and thank you for coming. At this moment, allow me to welcome Mr. Egaru Emmanuel Omiat to give us, a special announcement, which is the position of the council before we dive into the deeper discussion. Mr. Egaru.
Thank you very much, the Vice President, our special speakers and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me stand on the protocol already well laid. My name is Emmanuel Egaru Omiat. I represent the members of the Northern Bar at Uganda Law Societies Council, the Radical New Bar. Members, before we hear from our special guest on these very important areas of concerns that we are going to talk about and discuss today, as Uganda Law Society, there are a number of things, a number of issues which are very important to us and which concerns us so much. There are so many, but in the interest of time for today, and on behalf of my colleagues, the members of the council, and the members of Uganda Law Society, I'll just make a communication on one, or our position as council on one of the areas which is of significant importance to us as Uganda Law Society. And briefly, I want to address us on the issue of Uganda Law Society's nominees to the Uganda Judicial Service Commission, or our representatives. There has been a lot of discussions, a lot of questions everywhere we go. Members and the general public are concerned about our members who should be nominated and forwarded to the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs for the onward transmission to the appointing authority for the Judicial Service Commission to be properly constituted. Now, as you may be aware, this current council, following a court decision in High Court Business Application number 129 of 2023, in the case of Kalili Stephen versus Uganda Law Society, the High Court judge made a decision and to the effect that there must be an election or election process for the members of Uganda Law Society's nominees to the Judicial Service Commission, in line with Article 1462C of the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. Indeed, this council, after taking on our offices, we deliberated over this issue and we passed a resolution Thereafter, we issued an executive order, that was executive order number 2, to have our 2 representatives elected and nominated for the same. Indeed, our Electoral Commission of Uganda Law Society commenced the process. They took up and commenced the process of having our nominees elected. But unfortunately, as you may be aware, this process is currently held up in a litigation battle. And apparently, we are at the Court of Appeal, and there are 2 matters pending there. That is Court of Appeal via Appeal number 98 of 2025. That's in the case of Uganda Law Society versus Mugesha Hashim. And also Civil Appeal number 99 of 2025, Uganda Law Society versus Fiona Nabasa Gladys Wall. Now, it is also important, because of those cases, we were unable to move on with the elections. As you may be aware, Emergency General Assembly was called to have these elections and other activities of the Law Society move on, but due to these cases, this process has so far been halted. I would like to bring to your attention that Uganda Law Society has indeed recently received a request from the Permanent Secretary or Secretary Judicial Service Commission inviting Uganda Law Society to send the 2 names, the nominees of the Uganda Law Society, to Judicial Service Commission. This is supposed to be forwarded or submitted to the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs for the onward transmission to the appointing authority. Apparently, for the Uganda Judicial Service Commission to be properly constituted, as provided for in the Constitution, there must be, among others, nominees from Uganda Law Society. And so this Judicial Service Commission cannot be properly constituted until members of Uganda Law Societies are, the 2 nominees are forwarded. Now, this raises very serious concerns, and as Council and Uganda Law Society members, we are raising it as a serious concern that these cases indeed needs to be determined expeditiously, so as our members, nominated members, are forwarded. And so it is a matter which is very urgent and a matter of public interest. We therefore would like to take this opportunity and on this platform to raise it as a concern and urge our judiciary of the Republic of Uganda, that this process of having these matters fixed and determined expeditiously, so that to pave way for this election process and for the elected members, who then shall be forwarded to the ministry for onward transition. This is very, very key. It's a matter which is very urgent and of public interest because, as you may be aware, the Uganda Judicial Service Commission is one of the very important entity, and they have a number of roles, duties, and activities that they are supposed to render to this country, that they are supposed to render to the members of Uganda, to the citizens of Uganda, and without a constituted commission, it means there will be no much. They can't do much. And so failure, where these members are not nominated and where no activities are going on with the Judicial Service Commission, our vulnerable people who are yearning, the litigants, the people who need these services, clearly are unable to get these services. And also our voices as members of Uganda Law Society is required in this commission. And so our prayers And our request to the Judicial Service Commission is that, to the judiciary, is that let our matters, which are already pending before court, be expeditiously fixed and handled, so that we are able to have our members forwarded and nominated to these positions. And indeed, this will help so much, especially in dispensation of justice. As we all know, justice delayed, justice denied. And so if the Judicial Service Commission not constituted, the impact is immense. Clearly, this would certainly affect service delivery, which in turn will cause a miscarriage of justice. And also, of course, there will be wastage of public resources, because if these activities, the Judicial Service Commission are unable, and yet some of the members are already appointed, others already in place, it is a serious issue. It's a serious problem that needs to be dealt with. So in a nutshell, as members of the council and members of Uganda Law Society, and the candidates themselves, as you may be aware, there were already campaigns going on. There's a lot of anxiety, there are a lot of issues, a lot of concerns. All this can only be settled, can be put to rest if these cases are dealt with. So without and so finally, we have an official position that I would like to very quickly read. Uganda Law Society condemns court delays endangering President Semukade and obstructing counsel. The Uganda Law Society expresses grave concern about the implicable delays affecting numerous ongoing legal proceedings involving our organization and its president, Mr. Isaac Chimazi Sekade, Senior Counsel. These delays create the impression of animosity between the judiciary and the Uganda Law Society. The Uganda Law Society decries the current impasse where courts refuse to schedule hearing dates for cases filed by Mr. Samukade, who faces multiple arrest warrants, including an international one from Buganda Road Chief Magistrate Ronald Kaizi. He was also sentenced to 2 years in prison for contempt of court by Judge Musa Sekana in February 2025, allegedly for derogative social media remarks. Chief Justice Alphonse Windolo banned Semakande's speech at the 2025 New Law Year opening, demanding an apology for alleged insults, escalating tensions. The Uganda Law Society previously called for cordial engagements with the judiciary top management, and that was January 16th letter. An Honorable Norbert Mao, Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, offered to facilitate mediation, and our response remains resolve the relevant cases promptly. And then as far as a mediation summit is concerned, a mediation summit of bar bench leaders should not obstruct the timely disposal of cases concerning the president's personal liberty, the democratic mandate of the legal profession, and the services owed to the government, Judicial Service Commission, and the judiciary itself, and the public. Several cases are pending, including number 1, the High Court Criminal Division Business Application, number 30 of 2025. An implication by the President, Semakade, for a stay of suspension of the private prosecution case at Buganda Road, Chief Magistrate's Court. This matter remains adjourned Sunday, with the ruling to be delivered on notice. Number 2, the High Court Civil Division Business Application number 137 of 2025. An application for a stay of execution or suspension of Judge Sekana's conviction and 2-year sentence against the President, Semakade. This application has not been allowed, has not been allocated a judge or a hearing date. Number 3, a trio of appeals at the Court of Appeal, and civil appeals, number 98, number 99, and number 102, arising from Judge Sekana's decision to cancel the Uganda Law Society, EGM. Number 4, High Court Civil Division Business Application number 33 of 2025. The habeas corpus application concerning the military detention of Uganda Law Society's member, Advocate Aaron Kiza. As the governing body for the legal practitioners in Uganda, we emphasize the prompt resolution of these cases, which is essential to safeguarding President Semakade's rights, restore confidence in the judicial systems, and uphold the principles of justice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our position as counsel. Thank you very much. So may I invite the moderator to take us on to the next. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Egaru. I now would like to invite the moderator for the first issue, Mr. Isiko Arthur, to take over.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I'll be moderating the second phase of this discussion. The theme is Beyond Umeme, What Next? As you all know, Umeme Limited had a 20-year power distribution concession with the government of Uganda, which ended in March 2025, just last month. On the 1st of April 2025, Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited took over electricity distribution, infrastructure, and we have had reports, clashes over government payouts for Umeme. There has also been a lot of public fear in regards to whether this transition will cause a change in the tariff charges, load shedding, or constant blackouts. To address this issue or concerns, we are joined today by Mr. Alan Rakakoko and Mr. Obiga Harold. Mr. Alan Rakakoko will be the first discussant, but to give you a brief, Mr. Alan Rakakuku, sorry for that, is the head of legal services, Umeme Limited. He has been responsible for developing and implementing legal strategy and overseeing legal service delivery. Prior to joining Umeme, he was a partner in Rakakuku, Owinyi, Kakonge, and Company Advocates, where he oversaw the energy desk. He served as the legal and compliance manager at Capital Markets Authority, where he also oversaw the development of the legal and regulatory framework of Uganda's capital markets. He was a senior legal officer with Uganda Electricity Transmission Company Limited. Mr. Okokoko is an advocate of courts of judicature. He is a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, where he has served for more than 20 years, 12 of which he has been in-house counsel. He is a member of the advisory board of the African Corporate and Government Council Forum, an association that promotes the in-house counsel community in Africa. For those who read the Daily Monitor, there was a phrase that said, Umeme hands over power peacefully. We have been having issues, debates on whether there is always peaceful transition in this country. Allow me to invite Mr. Alan Rakokoko to elaborate further on this issue.
I think the question is, I'm going to have to be very delicate in the way I'm answering that, especially the last question about handover of power. Like they introduced me, my name is Alan Rakakoko. I'm the head of legal services at Umeme Limited, which until 2 days ago was the largest distributor in Uganda of electricity. Right now, your service provider is Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited. I presume that when you turned on your lights today, they went on, I hope, which means that when Umeme's concession ended, it did not go away and pack up the network and go. So the question of peaceful transition, I think that has already been answered. Umeme had 20 years and 30 days, which were established by contract. So just to go back a little bit, Umeme is a product of a power sector reform process that started in 1999. And it led to the establishment of the Electricity Act of 1999. Before that, I don't know how many of you remember UEB. You might have heard about it from your parents or something. I was there. UEB was a single, vertically integrated utility provider. It handled generation, distribution, transmission, and it did not have a regulator. So if UEB said this is what was going on, UEB was the law. The government felt that it was important to attract private capital, attract better management, because at that time UEB was in debt and struggling, and there were many things that they could not do because they did not have enough financing, and the network was, the word they used was dilapidated. So in the 90s, Uganda started seeing growth, and they needed an energy sector that could keep up with the development, because if you have industrialization and you don't have electricity that's keeping up, then you will not have, the industries won't come in. They'll just find a place with better electricity. So they decided to unbundle UEB and form 3 companies. So the assets that UEB used for generating power were given to Uganda Electricity Generation Company Limited, which is a Ugandan-owned generation company. The next assets were transmission assets, where the power that comes from the generation plant is sent at high voltage to a substation, which is, I think at that time, the highest voltage was 132 kilovolts, which is these metallic towers that most of us see. They have since made them much higher. We've gone up to 220. Then the distribution assets were given to a company called Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited. So I think the word we should have used was Umeme hands back the network. So Uganda Electricity Distribution Company is the legal owner of the distribution network, and it has always been. Umeme did not own the network. So UEB was vested into those three companies, which are called successor companies. One great thing that the 1999 Electricity Act did was they established a regulator. Harold has kept me honest for 10 years in Umeme and a few years extra when I was in UETCL in my previous life. The regulator is supposed to oversee. First, they license, so they control your entry. They oversee how you operate, and then they set the tariff, so they also control your pockets. I think Harold will say more about what they do in the first person. And the regulator has been overseeing operations, especially with regard to the private sector participating. So in 2005, Umeme executed 3 agreements and got 2 licenses. The agreements were that they would take a lease, and I use the word lease of distribution assets a bit loosely because the legal ownership always remained with UEDCL. What Umeme got was the right to possess and operate. So you're operating an asset which you know is UEDCL. So whenever we built a power line, whenever we built a substation, the asset was registered in the names of Uganda Electricity Distribution Company Limited. So Umeme basically had 2 arms. One, they were a utility for purposes of operations, but they were an investment company. Their job was to attract capital, invest that capital into improving the network through building power lines, connecting people, building substations, improving reliability. At that time in 2005, there were concerns about power theft and power losses. They believed that about 38% of the power that was generated and sold never made it to the final consumer. So the final consumer was paying more than he should have because of theft. Then the targets were a reduction in power theft. I mean, a reduction in power losses, which are both technical and non-technical. In the 20 years, I think the power losses have dropped from 38% to just about 16% right now. So Umeme had that target, and the target is enforced by the regulator. So there's an incentive and a penalty for either meeting it or not meeting it. There were also issues with collection. If there was a delay in collecting bills, you still had to pay the generator at the time. So the collections led to a few issues. So Umeme's task was to collect. Now, I am sure many of you are on the prepaid system. So rolling out the prepaid system helped with collections and helped make the sector more financially viable. And then the third was issues on reliability. So if your power was going out at the time, Umeme's job was to make sure that we kept the lights on. And those targets were given by the regulator. So in the 20 years, I think we've seen a great improvement, mainly because of Umeme's ability to attract capital and also the skills that were developed. So Umeme set up in 2005 and got to the lease and assignment agreement, the power sales agreement, where we bought power from Uganda Electricity Transmission Company. We had a support agreement with the government of Uganda, which was supposed to help with our investments. Then the regulator gave us 2 licenses. One was a distribution license and one was a supply license. Now, Umeme ran 2 tracks. The first was a utility. So for consumers, Umeme's job was to make sure that power was reliable, power was available. If you wanted a connection, I'm sure if you tried to get a connection in 2005, it was much harder than a connection now. So we set up a framework where you could actually apply for a connection online, get your connection in a shorter time than before. I think we have a target of 5 days after the documents are we had a target of 5 days after your documents are received. And the idea was run the network for 20 years, develop capacity, and when you're done, hand it back to the government, which is going to run it. If they did not feel ready, they would have given us an extension. But there was a strategic decision that the government would take over Umeme. Now, 5 years ago, Umeme had to do a study to see how the network was operating. It was reviewed 2 years ago. They called it a state of the network, where they were asking the question, has Umeme run the network prudently? That was very necessary because that was the network we're supposed to hand back to Uganda Electricity Distribution Company. And the network that was handed back 2 days ago is much bigger than what was given to us 5 years ago. I think, Harold, you have the numbers. I'll leave that one for you. But essentially, the idea of private sector concessions has been tested in Uganda. And allowing a private sector player to come in supervised, if you leave them unsupervised, there might be an issue. If you have a very strong regulator, which we had, if you manage to attract capital, which we have, you definitely will grow because the electricity sector requires investment. So just a quick one. In 2005, Umeme had two main shareholders, CDC Global, which is the UK government investment arm, and ESCOM, which was to come in for technical capacity because they're the ones who are running the dam. In 2006, they left. ESCOM left. So whenever you hear people saying a South African company, ESCOM was here for 1 year. ESCOM exited, Actis took over, which is also a UK investment fund. And then in 2012, Umeme had an IPO and they were listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. They have been one of the most active counters in our Uganda Securities Exchange, and they have contributed to the growth of our capital markets. Now in 2017, there was a sale of shares where NSSF now became the biggest shareholder in Umeme. So right now, if you're paying your NSSF, most lawyers are, I think by the time you get your PC approved, you must show you have been paying your NSSF. So NSSF is the biggest shareholder in Umeme, and they are the ones who are major stakeholders. They have a representative on our board, and whenever we have to look at issues that regard shareholders, NSSF is the biggest. We do have other funds. There are very many other shareholders that come in. I think we're about 5,000 shareholders plus. Many of you might be. So the question on the buyout amount, which has been making the news, is basically a question of you bring a private sector player, you have certain needs in the sector, like I mentioned, attracting investment, getting reliable power, selling and collecting. So Umeme's job was simply identify this problem, invest resources, both capital and human resources, solve the problem, get a return on investment. The agreements that are in place identify the kind of investments Umeme makes. They provide a framework for the regulator to approve them. And when you're done with the investment, the regulator allows them to be recovered through the tariff. There is no disagreement between Umeme and the government on that part, in principle, that once there's an investment, you have an entitlement to a return on your capital and the return on investment which you're entitled to. I think because we have been investing for 20 years, the real question was, did you invest the amounts that were expected? Now, the Auditor General, under the agreements, has the right to audit the investment amounts, which the Auditor General did. And he came up with a figure of, I think, $118 million. That did not take into account what we have been investing now, because it was a bit of a historical check. But the agreement also provides that at the end of the concession, which was 2 days ago, Umeme will provide a figure which reflects what Umeme thinks is its investment. So there is a discrepancy between what Umeme expects and what the government and the Auditor General said Umeme would get. That is also expected because under the concession agreements, this is information that is public, at the end of the concession, the government and Umeme are supposed to sit in a room and do a reconciliation. Some might call it a dispute, some might call it a face-off, but it is a reconciliation. I've never, like most lawyers, I never really quarrel with numbers. This is a numbers game. Investments have been reported, have been approved, they've been recorded, and now the documents have been audited. So we have a window through which Umeme and the government of Uganda will sit down, reconcile the amounts, and agree. So that is still going on. I cannot tell you how it is going to end because we still have about 30 days. But from what we have been talking to the government about, it is very cordial and it is expected to happen in a very organized manner. I hope I've calmed you down. That's mainly for the shareholders of Umeme, because right now Umeme is not running the network. So if you are a consumer of electricity services, the last 2 days have shown that the network is still around. It's still owned by the government of Uganda, and the government of Uganda actually has the duty to provide you with what does the Sustainable Development Goals call it? They call it, and it's goal number 7. You're supposed to have access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all by 2030. So that is the target, and it is aligned with the National Development Plan 4, which talks about access at about 80%. I know right now, on grid we're about 20%, and total, including solar, is about 50%, which is a great jump from 8% 20 years ago, of course taking into account how our population has more than doubled. So yes, so my final words, I think I've taken a lot of time. As a utility, Umeme handed over the network 2 days ago, and your lights are still on. So UEDCL is currently running the network, and I think many of you, if you have tried to load power, you have been successful. UEDCL has had 2 years to prepare the handover. We've had meetings every month for the last 2 years. They've taken on about 90% of the Umeme employees, so they've got the skills, and they intend to run it as efficiently and even better than Umeme. That's their promise. And I think the good thing is the regulator is also still watching. So you've gone from a situation where it's a private sector attracting capital. Now I think UEDCL is a pure utility, so they will be looking at more service. So it's my hope, of course I'm a consumer as well, that UEDCL will actually take us forward, because this state, with this phase that we are on, we're actually in a growth trajectory, so there's a lot more needed. Uganda's demand rises by, I think, about 12 to 13% per year. So that's a big jump. So yes, so I think I'd just like to give you assurance that as a utility, Umeme has handed over a network that was run prudently, and it has handed over a network that's still operating. It is not going with it, and the network still belongs to the government of Uganda. And you should expect, a properly run utility from UEDCL. As investors, if you're an investor in Umeme, the conversations are going on, and we do have a framework for that, which was envisaged in the concession agreements. So thank you. I hope if you were worried the last 2 days, and the fact that your power has not gone off should give you some comfort, I hope. Yeah. Thank you very much. Any questions? I see the podium. Do I take questions or
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for that insightful discussion. I think we can all agree that Umeme has done a lot of digital transformation. I remember we used to make these payments manually, make applications for Umeme manually, payments manually. Most of the workers, the ones who could follow up with the payments for Umeme, could always frequent our homes. And people could even wonder why. But Umeme has really done a good job. We commend you for such a beautiful transition. This juncture, allow me introduce to you Mr. Harold Obiga, who is our second discussant. Mr. Harold Obiga is the Director of Legal Services at the Electricity Regulatory Authority of Uganda. He has over 15 years of extensive experience in legal policy, regulatory affairs, across various sectors, which include power, renewable energy, telecommunications, finance, and banking. Mr. Obiga's contributions to Uganda's electricity sector has been very transformative. Since 2012, he has provided strategic regulatory guidance for major publicly financed energy projects, significantly advancing clean and renewable energy initiatives and facilitating private capital investments. Mr. Obiga has further influenced the harmonization of electricity regulations across the Southern and Western Africa. He has worked with the Energy Regulators Association of the Eastern Africa, where he has played a role in establishing the Independent Regulatory Board, IRB, for the Eastern Africa Power Pool. in 2023. He has also collaborated with regulators from 13 sub-Saharan countries to promote regional cooperation and sustainable energy development. Please allow me as a welcome Mr. Obiga. Let's give him an applause as he comes. We shall have the questions after the presentation.
So good afternoon once again. I'll pick up from where Alan has dropped the ball, and I believe that by the end you will have the same confidence. I imagine so. If I don't take you there, please remind me. So where did we stop? We are at a position where, as Alan has shared with us, what has happened is that there has been a change of the electricity sector from having the private sector running it to the public sector. And the underlying concerns that are raised are pretty familiar, and they are genuine. Blackouts, of course, affordability, which you have mentioned concerning tariffs, and naturally financing. Now, when we go back to the reasons, and that question I think is answered by us looking back to the initial decision as to why we brought in Umeme Limited and what it has been able to do and what has since transpired forward. I'll speak largely with a view to a couple of things. Majorly, what has Umeme been able to see and how do we expect to carry that forward from UEDCL, and why do we have these changes? As a government and as a sector in Uganda, we are in what we are calling the second generation reforms of the country. Okay, if you want to split the country, you can split it in various reforms. Pre-1999, after 1999, and then now. And what are we trying to achieve? Our objective as a government have not changed, and as a sector have not changed across the board. They remain the same. They remain access, they remain affordability, and speaking to tariffs, they also remain with a view to reliability, and I'm going to speak towards those. I'll start with the first, speaking to tariffs, okay? So one of the key concerns that we definitely have, and why you are confidently able to flip on the switch and have on the lights, is that you can afford that specific power. What are the things that have gone into that? Since the period that we've had, you will recall possibly if you are alive 20 years back from now, your tariff increased by 24%, okay? A couple of days ago, your tariff has not increased. It has reduced by 14%. So if you're asking yourself a question right now, am I able to actually flip on the light? Am I able to actually be able to have electricity? The answer right now is that you are more likely right now, today, than 20 years back to actually afford the electricity that you have with you. So UEDCL has come in as a government company. As ERA, we have licensed the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, and it has taken the operations of Umeme Limited. In a similar vein, they have, so the licenses that Alan was holding and Umeme Limited of distribution of electricity and also of supply of electricity are now being held by the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company. What does that mean? That simply means that the UEDCL and the government is the one now providing you the electricity. There are a couple of benefits to that. One of the first benefits that we need to be able to do is to have everyone have access to electricity. 10 years, 20 years ago, we've been struggling with access to electricity. Currently, access to electricity is at about 57%. Our desire is not to extend power to just the urban areas or the peri-urban areas, but also the rural areas. And who is the entity possibly best placed to do that? It is the government. Why is that the case? The case is that governments are able to, for instance, attract development finance at cheaper terms and on more concessional terms than the private sector. How is this playing out right now? You will recall that, for instance, two of the power projects that you have, that is Karuma and Isimba, have been publicly financed by the government of Uganda. So the long-term gain that we have is to have tariffs becoming affordable, government being able to attract financing to the sector, and then passing it on to the public sector. So that at the end of the day, when you switch on the lights, you actually have access to electricity. And that access has moved from about 11, I think 0.8%, 20 years back, to about 57%. Our desire is to move it to as high as 80% and to increase grid access, not just to keep it at the level of off-grid and on-grid. So these initiatives are actually geared to increasing finance in the sector, attracting development finance, and then seeing that at the end of the day, we are efficient. The other aspect that we've also got to ask ourselves is, how do we deal with the issues of blackouts? Or why did we used to have blackouts? Why did we not used to have blackouts? When Umeme Limited came, our generation, I think, was slightly in the margin of about 500 megawatts or thereabout. Since then, right now, we are slightly above 2,000 megawatts. So we have increased possibly like 3 times. So it's not just, when we talk of power actually being there and us not having blackouts, whereas we interface, for instance, with Umeme Limited and UEDCL, we also have to understand that there is a full backstory that contributes to this. So one of the things that we've been able to do is, first of all, make sure that during this period of time, we actually have enough electricity. By the time Umeme Limited came to this network, we didn't have enough electricity. We've been able to achieve that. We're slightly above 2,000 megawatts in terms of our installed capacity. And then in terms of our peak capacity, in other words, what we are actually right now using, we are slightly in the regions of about 1,100, 1,200. That gives us a good margin to assure the public that within the next period of time, we have secured the security of supply, and UEDCL will actually have a product and a good to actually be. And we couldn't have done this without entities, possibly like Umeme Limited, because one of the things they were also able to do is attract financing. So there is a big question out there in terms of, will the sector be able to continue attract financing of both public and private capital? My answer to that is possibly it's going to be a resounding yes. What we are seeing is that we can still attract financing in the sector based on the regulatory reforms. And this is the other thing that also affects your power consumption, is what Alan talked about, the availability of power. He talked of losses. 20 years back, those losses were at about 38%. Right now, they are slightly in the margin of about 16.9%, thereabout. What does that mean for you? That means, first of all, as ERA and as a sector, we have given UEDCL similar targets to Umeme Limited, in the sense that as of now, UEDCL also has an obligation that in the next 3 years, they should have even taken that loss further from the 16% into the region of about 12%. The impact of that is that we have more electricity available for everyone to actually have. Simply put, we are not relaxing the requirement to perform to UEDCL. There is a thinking out there that because this is government, it is going to be inefficient. As a regulator, and from what we have seen in the market, is that that does not take us where we want to go. So the targets that Umeme Limited have are actually still going to be carried forward by the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, which means the benefit of us having the lights on is going to specifically stay. The other thing, of course, that is important is that 20 years back from now, we were not at a place where the market was financially sustainable. And this may feed into the discussion of buyout, how much money. What we have seen is that with the injections that we've had from Umeme Limited over the period of time in terms of investing in the network, in terms of us being able to deliver electricity, in terms of the reforms that we are able to make. Previously, we had subsidies. Right now, we no longer have subsidies. It's going to be the same thing. As a sector, we don't intend to introduce subsidies from the government necessarily. That's not necessarily the case. Reason being is that the sector still remains financially viable. I also would like to let you know specifically that if you ask yourself, why will you invest in a country, okay? Why will you go to a country which you do not know about? One of the things that you will be comfortable about is that if I put in 1 shilling, I will actually be able to take out that 1 shilling. Not so? That is not going to change. So everyone who invests in the network, everyone who invests in the country will always be able to get their money back. The advantage of that is not to be underscored, because the Ugandan electricity sector is just possibly one of 2 viable financial sectors on the African continent. And that is not a small achievement by far. It comes with us being able to pay generators on time, with us being able to pay the transmission company on time, and the distribution system on time. If you've looked through the tariff announcements that we have made of recent, what we instead expect to see is that same continuity. So we are not making definite changes. So if you ask me, why would your lights not have come on? Your lights would possibly not have come on if someone who was producing electricity had not been paid. What I'm simply saying is that we still expect, because of the financial viability of the sector, to pay the people who produce electricity. And that should keep your specific lights on at any one point in time. The other concern, of course, is the number of changes that have happened 20 years. 20 years is a long period of time. You'll agree with me. 20 years ago, you would possibly make a strategic plan for how many years? For 10 years? For maybe 20 years, 15 years? That has changed. Nowadays, you want to make plans for as low as 3 years. Those are company strategic plans. So we have to ask ourselves, how can we incorporate these changes? How can we respond to these changes as fast as possible so that people get the exact desired service? And that takes us to the question of electricity reform, okay? So previously, everyone had to, for instance, buy power from one company, the Uganda Electricity Transmission Company, the UETCL. We have made changes to the market, and we are making changes to the market. If you are a big consumer, there are going to be possibilities for you to be able to buy power directly from the UETCL, or you may want to buy it from generation. All those changes. But remember, in this period of time, we have been having a contract which the government has committed to actually sanctify and respect. And that is one of the concerns that we specifically have. The other concern, of course, is we've also made changes. If you're close to the electricity sector, you've been asking yourself, if I choose to install a solar panel on my house, or if I'm an industry and maybe I have excess power, am I going to be able to sell it to the grid? We envisage that as technology keeps changing, it's going to be likely that me and you are not just going to be consumers of electricity. They're going to be prosumers of electricity. And we're seeing that across the board. We're seeing that in Zambia, we're seeing that in South Africa, we're seeing that in Namibia, we're seeing that in Kenya. So these changes that we are making are to actually prepare us to be able to do that when the time comes, to adopt all the various technologies. But also, without speaking much, 20 years ago, you had, Alan told you, we've had a generation, transmission, and distribution system. That has changed of recent, okay? People can establish their generation plants. They can be combined as mini-grid power plants, and then they can sell power to themselves or small communities. What we are envisaging is with this kind of concession, with this kind of changes, we should be able to accommodate that specifically. So, what is my take and what is my concern right now? One of my biggest concerns, and I think one of the resounding messages that we want to put forward there as a government, is that at the end of the day, it's extremely unlikely that we are going to see significant changes that will destabilize the market. A change is a natural occurrence. Everything that has happened right now in the buyout amount that has been reported by the press is not something that was not envisaged, and that's why the process is as simple. In January, Umeme Limited indicated an amount which it considered. By the end of March, the Auditor General confirmed what he had audited, and then there is a 30-day process to reconcile and make accounts speak to the same facts, okay? I must give credence to the people who drafted the concession agreements for the simple reason that all these things were kind of envisaged, okay? We envisaged a change, and what is the change? The change that we specifically envisaged is that another entity could come in. That entity has become the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company. We envisaged a likelihood that Umeme would have a different perspective, government would have a different perspective. And what has been the solution? The solution that has been provided for is that we'll have a period during which reconciliations will actually be made to ascertain what exactly is the cost, okay? We envisaged changes to be made to the market, and these changes are now beginning to happen, that possibly after 20 years, there may be a need, to have private capital merge with public capital. Those days it was not possible. Right now, it was not possible. Umeme has played its part. Some of the things that we have right now, the increased generation have been on account of attracting private capital, and that has been achieved. I think as a nation, as communities, as sectors, we now have to ask ourselves, how do I move beyond what I have right now to the next, so that power remains affordable. Power is not restricted to the people in Kampala, but it goes to the whole country. We can support industrialization so that everyone can be able, the country can be able to produce. There are so many changes that are happening right now in the electricity sector. So in my consideration, one of the things that I definitely see is that there is a period in which reforms have to be made, and this is the period that we are in. It's also not unusual for reforms to move forward, forward and backwards in regulatory reform. We've seen that across the board. We've seen that in South Africa, we've seen that in Uganda, we've seen that in Brazil and Chile and any other country. We've seen that in the UK. We've seen that in a number of countries. So right now we are in the phase where the government has not said, for instance, that it does not want private capital in the sector. No. The government has said that right now we've got to have a smarter and a more beneficial mix in the electricity sector. There have been changes that have been made. We need to be able to take account of them. Who are the biggest beneficiaries in terms of these changes? I think the biggest beneficiaries in terms of these changes are consumers. Me and you, you're now able to communicate much more efficiently. You're now able to incorporate ICT into your systems. You now have more power, more reliable for a longer period of time. That used not to be the case 20 years back. You're now able to have power in some of your villages. Who have been the biggest beneficiaries? It is the consumers, me and you. And what we want to do is carry that further forward. And the government has not yet closed out private capital across the electricity sector. Just to give you a simple example, in transmission, we have recently opened up the transmission segment to be able to allow private capital. Previously, it was only government that was doing public capital in transmission. We have now opened it up, and we're saying that even where the government was right now, we want to introduce the same kind of concept that we had with Umeme Limited and begin to see that if I introduce private capital in transmission, will the transmission segment become efficient? But government has many priorities. It has quite a number of priorities for distribution, and that is why I think what we are seeing right now is the beginning of a formulation of a relationship between the public and the private, specifically for purposes of seeing that at the end of the day, we can have a harmonious way in which both private capital and public capital come to the electricity sector. So it's an interesting phase. We've made a number of wins during this period of time. Umeme Limited is arguably one of the best utility, as one of the best utility companies on the continent. They still have options to extend that. They still have options, and many countries are looking at that. We want to step ahead of Africa. We don't want to remain here. We want to see that when you have done this, you also need to do the other, and the other, and the other. We want to remain a leader. You do not remain a leader by maintaining the same kind of structure. You become a leader by specifically improving the segment, by making changes, and by seeing that at the end of the day, these changes actually deliver the expectations of the public, the government, and all stakeholders. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harold, for that wonderful presentation. At this juncture, I will call upon questions. If there are any questions here, you'll allow us to, our panelists will be answering the questions from where they are seated. They can use the desk microphones there. I call upon any questions. Are there any questions? As you prepare your questions, I have some online questions. The first question is addressed to Mr. Allen. It was raised by Ms. Susan. The question is, how will the transition impact the overall economy and social welfare of Uganda? How will the transition impact the overall economy and the social welfare of Uganda? I think this is addressed, it can be addressed by Mr. Allen.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting question. I'll probably share it with Harold. The idea of a transition is, it is expected that you now have a largely de-risked sector. If you compare the distribution sector now, even the whole electricity supply industry now, with the way it was 20 years ago, you will find that, I'll give you an example. When Umeme bid, because we bid for the license, there were 5 companies that bid before, and they were not interested because they believed that the asset was toxic. Right now, I think if the government put out a bid right now, you'd have a stampede. And mainly because, one, the sector is more organized. When you have a sector that has a structure that treats a public asset like a private entity, you have a regulator in place that keeps everyone honest. And I must admit, the regulator has gotten a lot more awards than most regulators we know. Then you have a sector that is one of 2 countries that has cost-reflective tariffs, where if an investor puts his money in, he knows that he won't be relying on a government subsidy to get it back. I think this transition gives an opportunity for the government to continue to provide services at the level of a private entity. It will do 2 things. One, if the government takes on this job, the 20% return on investment could be absorbed by the government. And it could work in 2 ways, either lead to revenue for the government, or I think the government has stated that it could lead to lower tariffs for the consumers. So that 20%, I think, is now at 4%. Well, yeah. So they can afford to lower their rate of return and have the tariffs go down. So for the economy, a lower tariff could lead to reduced cost of business, and could lead to, you'd invest that money into increasing employment. It could lead to greater industrialization because the cost of power is a major input. And we've seen a very progressive tariff where, if you're extra large, you get power at a lower unit rate. And it is expected to see growth. And I think that is the reason why you have a growth in demand of 12%. That usually means that your economy is growing. If you want to know your economic growth, know by how much more power people use. And I think in your home, if you use more power, maybe your neighbors will be borrowing more money from you. So I don't think I can speculate. I can actually state that over time we have seen it. And I think this trajectory will grow. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Allen. Are there any questions physically here?
Yes, I have one. Mine goes to Alan. Thank you for everything that you've done so far, the 20 years, but I have a question. I come from West Nile, Arua, and as I was growing up, we used not to travel to Arua because there was no power. Up to very recently, I think last year, that were put on the national grid. So my question was, Okay, you might not, you still have the answer because that was the time then. Why did it take almost forever for Arua or the West Nile to be put on the national grid? And the question really is because it has affected the region for so long that up to now, people are still not sure. Because those days, I think you remember when our power used to go off at midnight, and then you have to stay in the dark up to, I think it's been put back at 8. That inconsistency was really quite disturbing. Then the second question goes to Mr. Harold. If I got it right from both your submissions, which we are really grateful for, the government is now going to be the supplier of the power, UEDCL. We're wondering, given the previous, the different contracts that the government has had, can one service provider, that is UEDCL, still give us the guarantees of consistency? Because this is now government, this is no longer private. I hope the question is clear. How can we be sure that government as the supplier of electricity is going to be as effective, of course, as Umeme was private, and for the remaining of time? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Alan, you can answer the question.
Thank you. That's an interesting question. I think it's something we've been discussing for about 20 years. I remember just starting out. So Umeme's concession area, because Umeme was not the only distributor. At some point there were 8. I think when Reco is still licensed even now, Kalangala still has a license. So one of the challenges with being very far away from the center, or having like a lake between you and the dam, is they have to build a power line that will go from the generator to where you are, all the way to your home. I think the cost of construction was a bit oppressive at the time. And then there was a study done, what was it, 95 by the mayor, where they were looking at the cost of constructing the line against the level of consumption of power. And at that time, I think they were suggesting that they build a dam in West Nile, which will now supply West Nile. They called it in island mode. I think that is Nyagak. So they believed that it was more financially viable to build the plant near where the suppliers were than it would be to build a power line from, say, now Karuma. So the power line would be more expensive than, and then you have to recover that money through the tariff. So you've already sunk it, your tariff would be oppressive. So, and that is something that I think is also being considered. You want to have reliable power that is financial, that is not very expensive. Every generator now, and I think Harold will confirm this, has to confirm that they can operate in island mode for 2 reasons. If one dam goes down, it should not trigger a fault on your line. So you should be able to isolate your area. That leads to you making sure power is available. West Nile has grown in demand from the 1 megawatt 20 years ago to now being a major player. And I think with the growth in demand, there has to be growth in investment. And that is why of course, first of all, constructing Karuma, building the power lines, the fact that we might be exporting to Sudan, now there's a justification for the transmission infrastructure to get to West Nile and then the distribution infrastructure. So it is expected that as part of the process, because now grid electricity is not the only source of power. If you're in a place where they require a lot of investment, they might start off by putting you in what they call an isolated grid, or providing for solar, and then later on, when the grid gets to you and it is not financially oppressive to give a return, then they add that on. So that I hope that has helped. It's the same question that can come from Kalangala, we'll give the same answer. Although I see, maybe Harold first, there's a question I see online, but we'll do that later.
Okay, thank you. To the second question that you've asked, Alan, you've pretty much clarified why when Reco and why you still have power now, but you also, I also want to underscore that right now we have about 41 generators. About 20 years back, we possibly had about 3. Right now we have about 41 people generating power. Some of those generators are actually in West Nile, so it's a process that has come to change. You have Nyagak 1 and you have Nyagak 3 that's coming on. Now, to the service providers, how do you ensure consistency, and why should you have comfort that UEDCL, for some reason, I sense a distrust of the ability of government companies to provide services, and that should not be the case. I want to underscore that government services what government companies actually do is that they release what we call, they go to places which may not be considered viable, okay? Because for instance, as a private company, you may not ask someone like Umeme Limited to go and give electricity to your person in the village, okay? It just doesn't make economic sense. What governments come and do, they make it viable, attractive, and then possibly they step out. That's what we see across the globe, and that is what UEDCL is going to do. But as they do that, does that mean that for the current people who are consuming electricity, you're going to have a problem? No, you're not going to have a problem. Why? As the same parameters that we gave to Umeme Limited are the same requirements that UEDCL actually has, if not possibly more stringent, okay? So for instance, if Umeme, and we've had talks on losses and all manner of things, if Umeme Limited was required to always make sure that the whole country has power for 24 hours or 20 hours, just by backhand of the calculation, that is not going to change. UEDCL still has the same obligation. Why should UEDCL be able to do that? If UEDCL does not achieve those targets that we give them, they will suffer a financial penalty. The same kind of financial penalty that we exposed to Umeme Limited is the same kind of financial penalty that UEDCL will actually be exposed to. So they have every reason to actually make sure that the lights are on, they distribute the power, they respond to your complaints on time. And now that Umeme Limited has given us very good data, we can even make smarter decisions concerning that. So it's one of those situations where we don't expect to see low service quality, but also increased service quality. But also I want to give comfort to the public and to yourself and everyone else, that if you look through the people that were running Umeme Limited, the same people have actually been absorbed into the Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, so they know what they need to do. There was a good skill transfer that we had from Umeme Limited to UEDCL, and we are not changing the human resources. So these same people who are in Umeme Limited are the same people who are going to continue providing you service. So you should be able to see and have a good service. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that clarity. The other online question that we got was from Mr. Fred. This is Mr. Harold. What measures will be taken to ensure compliance with relevant laws and regulations during this transition?
Okay. What measures are we taking to ensure compliance, okay, with the expected goals? So we did what we call a public hearing. And why did we do that public hearing? One of the reasons we did that public hearing is to make sure that we understand what does the public want when UEDCL comes, okay? We understood what the public wants. So for instance, UEDCL is expected to connect the same number of people, 300,000 consumers per year, okay? How this works is that if they do not meet that target, that expectation, there is a penalty that is imposed upon them, a financial penalty. So they actually make a loss. So it's there. However, if they achieve it, they keep the reward. Just to think about one parameter. When we go to the same thing of losses, it's about the same thing. That if they do not achieve the loss targets that we have given them as a company, they are going to actually not be as profitable as required to earn all that return that we are talking about of 4% and all that. So they have an initiative. They have already an incentive, an inbuilt incentive. The way the sector works, it works on what we call an incentive-based regulation scheme. I give you a target, and then I tell you, this is what I want you to do. And I set it. I just keep taking it higher and higher. As I've said, I've just kept putting it higher and higher. So it's in UEDCL's interest to actually hit the ground running and make sure that if they don't do that, they will suffer a financial penalty. Umeme Limited would suffer that penalty, and how would they pass it on is possibly less dividends, that kind of thing. For them, they suffer that financial penalty in the same way, and they cannot even pass it on. So it's a concern, and it's one of the things that is inbuilt in the system. As we said, the electricity sector is financially viable to make sure that at the end of the day, all utilities, and this happens across all utilities, whether it is generation, whether it is transmission, so we don't really discriminate. And we don't give them, the other thing, of course, is that we have not given UEDCL any special protections. We expect them to run like a government, like a private company, same efficiency. So someone could ask, maybe now you're going to favor UEDCL, you're giving them less targets, you're telling them, you know, you're not going to do this, you're not going to do this. No, they have similar and if not higher obligations. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for that clarity. Another question is from someone who is anonymous. I think it is a bit similar to question one. I'll ask Mr. Allen to elaborate further. What is the expected financial impact of the transition on Umeme and its stakeholders? What is the expected financial impact of the transition on Umeme and its stakeholders? It's from Anonymous.
Okay, like I think we mentioned that Umeme used to wear two hats. First as a utility, because it was supposed to operate the network, and then secondly as an investment company. So Umeme's job was to secure financing, get the financing and invest it in the network, have improved service, collect the money, collect money for the entire sector, pay for transmission which goes into generation, and then get a return on investment. Now, the concession has ended. It has actually lapsed. It ran till the end of its natural term, and it ended. So the agreement provided for a buyout amount, which is basically a recovery of what was invested in accordance with the agreement. That is really what the final expectation is for Umeme. It also happens that I think our human resource costs have dropped because UEDCL has taken 90% of the staff. I think Umeme has gone down from 3,000 plus employees to about, I think, 28, 30 now. So it's basically time for Umeme Umeme is no longer a utility. However, because of the transition, they're still around to provide support so that you don't have an issue with UEDCL. So the idea is Umeme as a utility with the concession that it had, it lapsed 2 days ago. With the payment of the buyout amount, I think Umeme will have to really restructure itself. So you won't have the same Umeme, you know, but I think there will be a shareholder, an AGM in May. And like every company, as lawyers know, the decisions on what happens to the future of the company are made by the shareholders. So that decision will be laid before the shareholders, and they will make a decision on what to do. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. This is addressed to Mr. Harold. It says, what is the timeline for the transition, and what are the key milestones to be achieved?
Sorry, could you repeat that?
What are the timelines for the transition?
Okay.
And what are the key milestones to be achieved?
Okay, so we are in the first period that we are in right now is after the end of this transition, is that right now we have a 30-day period. What is expected in this 30-day period is to make any reconciliations between Umeme Limited and UEDCL, Umeme Limited and the government of Uganda concerning the buyout amount, what has been included, what has been excluded, what should be included, what should not be included. That period ends in about 30 days. Umeme Limited has another about 66 months from the time their concession ends for them to be able to provide support to the market, but rather to UEDCL, and to work out a number of small teething issues contractually. Those are the simple timelines. Those are the kind of expectations that we expect to see over this period of time, and we also naturally expect that even as we do that, both entities will continue to, because there's a bit of a learning curve. You don't just let go immediately. The concession has been able to provide for that. If it is investments, if it is financing, if it is human resources, if it is reconciliation, if it is stock taking, if it is inventories, all that is going to happen within this specific period of time. Then Umeme Limited will also, as Alan has said, they're going to make a decision, because you see in the listing of Umeme Limited, it was very clear that they have a concession and that is their underlying business. However, they remain a company. They remain a company that is listed. They remain a financially viable company, in my opinion, and they have to decide what are they going to do next. There are many opportunities across the globe, in Uganda, for them to be able to decide how to metamorphose into something new that possibly will be a big seller. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that clarity. The last online question is addressed to Mr. Alan. I think he was responding to your discussion. The question is Mr. Rakakuku insinuating that the recent power cuts were deliberate because of the conflict between them and the government over the closure of the concession?
Those are actually three questions. Very interesting. I try to avoid the word insinuating. I hope I did not insinuate that. I hope that was not did not come out in my presentation. I will start with the last bit. I think the word closure should be amended to read the natural end of the concession. Umeme was aware of the natural end of the concession 2 years ago. They were required to apply for a new license, but when the information came in that the government intended to take over, they were aware. There was no conflict, and there has never been a conflict on that. We were aware, and we started the process of they call it retransfer back to the owner. The recent outages, one, they were regrettable. But then they were caused by three main things. The first is, you noticed they started around the time when we had a lot of rain. Every rainy season comes with poles falling, sometimes we have some issues with power lines, and this particular one affected the 33 kV lines, which are, they call them high voltage, but in the distribution, that's the high voltage. At the very same time, I know especially if you live in Entebbe, so Umeme's obligations in court, where we're sued, are not going to be as absorbed by the government. We're going to go through that process. And of course, under the law, if you start a process of winding up, which I'm not saying we're doing, you have to make provision for potential liability. Our board is very aware of what that means. For the last 2 years, I've been taking our case numbers down through settlements, speeding things up in court. The good thing is the judicial, many of the courts understood this and sped up their decision making. So I think while our concession has ended, the company as a legal entity still exists, and I'm working on ensuring that we do not, we make sure we deal with every other issue that's outstanding. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Members, allow us congratulate the following persons for having done a great presentation. This juncture, I'll invite our moderator to proceed with whatever is flowing.
Thank you, Treasurer, Mr. Isiko Arthur. And thank you to our two presenters. We, the people from Gulo, are hopeful that this time power will not be off 2 weeks straight. We are very... I now invite Mr. Eddie Nangulu, the moderator for the second session. Mr. Nangulu.
I'm taller than everybody, I think, who has been standing here. So you'll permit me. I'm joking. Good afternoon. I hope you are well. My name is Eddie Nangulu. I am the ULS Eastern Council member. I'm taking on the next segment of our Rnblive. The title is Flood City and the Quest for Justice. Earlier, before we even sat down, after I had read what had been prevailing, the cries of the public and the sudden rains, the poor infrastructure, the losses that are attendant to the floods and the heavy downpour. Today we are joined by specialists to help us understand and break down some of these complexities. So our first speaker is Madam Samantha Tukunda Kakuru Mwesigwa. Ms. Samantha is the Director and Legal Counsel of Greenwatch. She's a holder of a bachelor's degree in law from UCU and a master's in law in environmental and natural resources from the University of Oregon. She's practicing and managing partner with Kakuru and co-advocates. She previously worked with the Center for Environment Rights in Cape Town, South Africa. She's the founding fellow of the Women in Environment in Africa, an organization which was created to empower women leaders in African conservation to protect the diversity of the environment. While working with Greenwatch, Samantha has instituted public interest litigation on matters of the environment. She has closely worked with JTI to train judicial officers on climate justice and also train communities and local government leaders in resource management. Allow me to invite her to break down the flood city and the quest for justice.
It's afternoon, I believe. I like it when there's a group of gentlemen and then there's one lady and then the gentlemen say, ladies first. So I kind of expected that it would apply at this panel, but well, let's you can explain. All right, let's move on. Like Council Eddie has ably introduced me, I work with Greenwatch. I'll talk more about the work that I do with Greenwatch, and I believe that's the reason why I'm speaking to you this afternoon. Greenwatch is a non-government organization that promotes environmental protection and conservation as well, using advocacy and the law. We've been in existence for 30 years. We are celebrating our 30th anniversary this month on the 25th. The three pillars that Greenwatch stands by, and maybe before I speak about the three pillars, non-government organizations are part of the civil society network, just like I believe Uganda Law Society is a part of the civil society network. Civil society organizations, or let me say networks, are not government, should I say government controlled, neither are they private sector controlled or managed. So our mandate in civil society is to ensure that we speak for the communities, we speak for the public, we speak for Ugandans. And I think this is the reason why I was invited to talk about Flood City. Quite a catchy topic to discuss, and I hope we can be able to break it down and it will make more sense. So looking at the three aspects of civil society and Greenwatch Inclusive, we advocate, we empower, and we litigate. I'm giving this as a preface to what I'm going to talk about so that we have context and background information when it comes to that topic that I will be speaking about. So when we're looking at advocating, this is public support. We're supporting the public, we are recommending a particular policy or interest. And for Greenwatch's case, it's environmental protection, conservation, enforcement of environmental laws, policies, and the like. When we're looking at empowerment, and empowerment is one of the most important aspects that whether it's Ugandans or communities can have, it's to give authority. We are giving authority and confidence for people to be able to take control of their life and also to know that they have avenues and they can make decisions and take action. I think one of the reasons why we have flood city as a topic today is because of the effect of the heavy rains and the flooding, the effect that that has had on Ugandans. People have lost lives, properties have been damaged, we've been obstructed from our daily routines, and that's a public outcry. So we are here to empower you, and I really, really applaud Uganda Law Society. I think I should have begun with that, but I knew everyone was kind of weary, so I just started blazing, guns blazing. Uganda Law Society, I appreciate you for creating this platform and this space so that we can be able to discuss these issues, not just as the legal fraternity, but as lawyers and Ugandans as a whole. So thank you very, very much. I was speaking on empowerment, and now I'll go to litigation, which is litigate, which is one of the pillars that Greenwatch stands by. That's why you had in my bio about public interest environmental litigation. So we really, really consider litigation as a last resort because of the many things that are attached with litigation, whether it's resources, whether it's the length of time that cases take in court, whether it's just that whole process, emotionally and physically, mainly for our clients who are mainly communities and other fellow civil society organizations. So litigation is our last resort. And in litigation, we engage the legal process. I think I'm preaching to the congregation that's already converted, to resolve disputes and claims through the court systems. So let me speak now that you've understood what civil society organizations do and what Greenwatch in particular does. And I believe why I was invited to speak. Let's look at Flood City. Or is it called City? No, City Flood? Flood City. I will not address it really on a technical point of view because I do not have that expertise, but then I will address it based on my experience working with whether it's communities or environmental protection and conservation. And I've had, Councillor Eddie was asking me, so the floods, is it as a result of climate change? Is it an act of God? Is it inadequate drainage systems? And I looked at him and said, act of God. We know on the ark, that was an act of God. Those floods were an act of God. The floods that we experienced was a result of heavy rainfall. And heavy rainfall can be attributed to climate change. I do not want to assume that we all understand I'm not going to go into the science, but just the generalities of what climate change is. Climate change is warming of the globe. How does the globe become warm? It becomes warm as a result of the emission of greenhouse gases. Now, greenhouse gases emissions are as a result of anthropogenic activities, which is human-induced activities. For example, fossil fuels, deforestation, agriculture, transport sector, and the like. So when the gases are emitted into our atmosphere, it raises the temperature. And because there's the ozone layer that covers the earth, and sometimes the gases take a while to penetrate through. So they stay within the earth and make it hot. And when the temperatures increase, then we see the effects of the increase of the temperatures resulting into change in climate patterns. And one of those effects is prolonged precipitation or heavy rainfalls or torrential rainfalls, and just zeroing down into the heavy rainfalls, because this is what we are seeing. If you would notice that before the rains came, there was a lot of heat. It was hot, the temperatures were high, and we kept complaining, when are the rains coming? And the rains did fall. So, is it directly connected to climate change? Heavy rainfalls? Yes. Flooding of the city? Not so much. And why do I say this? Maybe before we look at the city floods, just to add that even climate change being a global phenomenon, we as the international, whether it's in the countries in general, using the science, have been able to know how to manage the effects of climate change. And this is done through adaptation, which is really modifying human systems so that they can be able to cope with the impacts of climate change. Remember, we talked about the impacts of climate change being heavy rainfalls, drought, landslides, and the like. So, adaptation systems are the ones that are put in place so that they can be able to cope with the change in climate. The second one is mitigation. And mitigation really means reduction of greenhouse gases. I don't know if I mentioned that greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, but mainly carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide is the gas that's emitted when fossil fuels are emitted into the atmosphere. So, even though we are experiencing climate change, which is a reality, there are some people who think, presidents of a certain country that I will not mention, that climate change is a hoax. The science is there. And it's not only about the scientific evidence, but we are actually experiencing, even when we go into the communities and ask the elderly, those who've lived for a long time. I like that Uganda's population, I don't know if it's something to like, but something to admire, that Uganda's population is mainly made out of, is comprised of the youth. But we still have people who have lived long enough to tell us what the climatic patterns were in the past. And they are noticing a change. So it's not only scientific, but it's something that we are also observing. So let's maybe dive into whether the floods are as a result of climate change or infrastructure issues. I would like to believe, as lawyers, do we believe or do we have hardcore evidence? And state the facts as they are. That the heavy rains are really, the floods, not the heavy rains, are as a result of inadequate drainage systems, mainly here in Kampala city. But they've also been aggravated by the road works that are going on. If you would notice, all our roads are being worked on, and I really applaud the Prime Minister who actually called a press conference that I watched on UBC, and she was calling the people who are responsible for the construction and maintenance of these roads to answer. Why is it that we are going through what we are going through? So there are different types of flooding. We have the floods that affect areas such as Kasese, which we recently visited with a team from the Uganda Law Society, restoring the riverbanks. As a result of the heating of the earth, we have the glaciers that are on the mountain peaks melting. And when they melt, the water flows down the mountains and causes a huge rush coming down through the waterways, through the river. And that process results into the breaking of the riverbanks. And if the riverbanks have been cultivated, and like I told you, human-induced activities, if trees have been cut down, if there's not enough protection or water catchment areas, then those floods can be attributed to climate change. But the floods in the city, I would like to submit that they are attributed to inadequate drainage systems, poorly maintained drainage systems that have been failed to handle heavy rainfall leading to floods. Let's also not forget the aspect of waste management. Every time you throw out a cavera, every time you throw out a plastic bottle, all that ends up into our drainage systems. I usually take the route through industrial area to Muyenga. And sometimes you see the community that lives there, there's a slum community there. They gather together and they start actually scooping out the waste. And most of it is cavera and most of it is plastics. So I will use this platform to say next time that you use a plastic bottle or a cavera, just opt for something different, because all that is going to end up in the drainage systems, and it will become a ripple effect of the floods that we are experiencing. All right, what can be done? What can be done? Council Eddie was asking me, but these things, it's a recurring event. Every time the heavy rains come, we have loss of lives, we have loss of damage. Why isn't anyone doing anything about it? And I'm glad that we have these platforms, because one of the things that we can do is actually advocate, empower, and where those two fail, litigate. Hold the people who are responsible accountable. Maybe we'll not call a press conference this time and ask questions. Maybe that's not, we don't have the mandate to do that, but we do have the mandate to litigate at the end of the day. So I applaud the Uganda Law Society for organizing platforms like this where we can educate, because part of advocacy is education, but also empowerment. And you notice that most of the people who are affected, not most of the people, but those who are prone to either loss, damage or loss of lives are people who live in slum areas. Do they know that they can access information, that they can access justice? And I think that is an empowerment tool. Once they're empowered to do that and have civil society organizations, even the Uganda Law Society, being able to empower them in that way, then this is something that can be done, but also holding those responsible accountable. I think that one really, really digs deep, because the next time that contractors are being sluggish on whether it's road maintenance, or if KCCA is not maintaining the drainage system very well, they will be aware that they will actually be held responsible or brought to book. Sometimes things just run under the bridge because there's either the people who should be watching have taken a back seat, or they are not affected enough to, voice out the claims. And I'm also, as I talk to you, I'm also talking to myself as someone who heads a civil society organization. So I would like to conclude at that point. And thank you very much for your attention, and questions are welcome.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I don't know how you easily sailed through that discussion. Do we have questions to ask? We can take on some questions. My undoing is that in discussing with Samantha, I had told her my questions. And now she answered them rightly. But let me have members ask, then we can pick on from there.
Thank you so much. My name is Samuel Muhumuza, council member. I just want to say something on climate change and also ask you my question, Samantha. Thank you for your wonderful presentation. I am fascinated by the conversation on climate change. And as someone who has read a bit of evolution, history of how our planet has evolved over time, I tend to believe that the conversation around climate change is either a fallacy or just a money-making machine. Because if you go back several million years back, we had the age of dinosaurs, which faced extinction by an event that occurred, probably they talk of meteorites, etc. Then after that, we had the Ice Age. which must have been the climate change of that time. And now we have this. As someone who believes, I don't know whether I believe or not, is it not part of God's grand plan that these events must occur? And we should not be fighting these events from occurring.
I like how we bring our very good God into these matters. But I'm going to resist from going to the theology. I'm actually a pastor and a reader of the word, but I'm going to address it differently. First of all, science doesn't lie. We have specific institutions that have been set up to carry out scientific research about what exactly is going on and how it is that we moved from the Earth being about 1 degree Celsius to an increase over in that. But also when you go back and look at the dinosaur era, you will notice that there's one component there. There's one component that we are actually living with that wasn't there before. I don't know if human beings lived at the time, and if they did, if they were emitting greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Because the whole concept of climate change is that as a result of industrialization, as a result of emissions of gases, the Earth is heating up. Let's put the science aside. Like I was speaking and talking about how the climatic patterns used to be before. Maybe not as far back as Ice Age, but in the recent future, what the scientists talk about the 1800s, moving into the 1900s, what the temperature was like at that time. Because at that time, there was no industrialization and capitalization had not yet gained traction, was still very reliant on the few resources of agriculture, so to speak. So, let me bring in God. God actually provides us with wisdom, knowledge, understanding. We have the facts at hand, but also this is not something that cannot be reversed. It can. All we have to do is stop emitting gases. But the people who run economies, fossil fuel companies, who actually run the economies of the world, get most of the big bucks from fossil fuels. So that, I think, is the current fight. So I do acknowledge that climate change is a reality. It is not a money-making machine. If it was, I would be very rich. But it's not.
Okay, thank you. Another question?
Thank you so much, Council Member Mr. Nangulu. I don't know whether I should also introduce you as Interim Secretary.
Please.
That is for another day. My question is, there is an outcry in the public that Greenwatch is only interested in the outcome, seeing the green, but is not interested in the process. What do I mean? That recently, not so back ago, people in Rubiji were evicted. And there was an outcry, a national outcry, that people were evicted without following the legal procedures. And one of the key mandates of Greenwatch is to ensure compliance with laws and principles of environmental law. So the question is, has Greenwatch taken any formal steps? Forget about the talking. Have they taken any formal steps to address this issue, the outcry that in the spirit of trying to protect the environment, they also ensure that the enforcers follow the law. I think that's my question that I would need clarity from her.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a very good question. It puts me on the spot. I'm wondering if I'm part of the bench or I'm on the other side. But nonetheless, so Greenwatch has, should I say, policy, let me call them policies, on how we address different outcries within environmental challenges like that. Sometimes we do take on these cases ourselves whenever we have the resources and capacity to. Other times, we get claimants who come to us to report on different matters and see how best we can move forward with them. Our first action point, even maybe before I go into the processes of all that, no, we have not done work with the community in that area, but it's something that as an organization and other sister organizations as well, because in the line of work that we do, a community network is so much better than individual organization coming, because of the very many things that surround, whether it's capacity, whether it's resources, whether it's even just strategic litigation on its own. So that is something that we have not done. I will not say that we have done it, we haven't. But in other sectors and areas, for example, if you would look at victims of the landslides in Bududa, we've been litigating in court on that. If you would consider Kasese floods as well, we've been doing community engagements in that area as well. We've also been carrying out research in collaboration with universities. This is really with regard to waste management and law enforcement and to allow us to obtain information to have a strategic plan. So maybe if you would say to zero down on that particular community, no, we haven't. But in others, yes, we have.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? Please, there's a hand at the back there. Today you're on the spot, Samantha.
Thank you.
I'm comfortable on the spot.
So my question is a follow-up question to what our treasurer has asked. You mentioned that Greenwatch does litigation. So would you consider, I know you've not done litigation in those areas, but would you consider, on behalf of those who lost their lives in the recent floods, can Greenwatch do something about it, public interest litigation in that area? And also, what would you recommend? What policy reforms would you recommend that the government can make, the legislature can make in that regard to avoid this happening every year? We see the landslides happening almost every year in Mbale, Kasese floods. So what policy reforms can we advocate for? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I'll mention that Greenwatch we outsource our legal capacity. We are not yet registered as a legal aid service provider, but that is a process that we've begun this year because we've been lobbying for resources so that we can be able to actually not run on projects, but run on programs. So non-government organizations run two ways. They can be project-based, where we are probably having a sensitization on whether it's elimination of plastics or things like that. So our resources are mainly geared to that particular project, which is limiting. Then they are program sectors where now we are engaged in not really a specific project, but a program. And I'm sure ULS is very familiar with this, like how they have their rule of law program. So this year we'll be embarking on an environmental law clinic program with many of our partners who are in the same field. And that's a process that's ongoing so that we can be able to take on more litigation cases and that we can also be able to have both the capacity and the resources, which I must point out is very important. Maybe the Uganda Law Society can help us so that we can have lawyers on pro bono basis for us, because also that's one of our limiting factors. When we are moving into something like he's mentioned, we have to be able to have the capacity to sustain that. And in most cases, we don't. When we are looking at policies, she asked a question about policies, what policies can be put in place. We have good policies and the law is there. That's not where the issue is. We can't keep having more policies because we have them all. The issue is on enforcement, the issue is on groundwork, and not relying mostly on organizations like the Uganda Red Cross and other civil society organizations who move into these areas when disaster has happened. But also, like she talked about landslides and floods, most of the time we have this information. My colleague is not, he's over there, he was telling me about how the workers at Uganda Meteorological
something
have laid down their tools for non-pay. Yes. I'm relying on your information. Yes, I don't want to be quoted. Yes. So we have those centers that have that information that can actually provide the people with this information so that they can be aware of what is coming ahead, but that is not being done. So it's I would say it's not about releasing policies. That's very easy to do. They can just, hire me on consultancy and I will write the things, but it's actually enforcement and not policy making.
Okay. Let me ask, this one is now my own. Where do we draw the line? In one venue here, policy advocates lament about the refugee evictions and lambast the government against eviction of persons or destroying of property. And the government shall say, they're in the wetland. We need the wetlands to be able to buffer and to hold these waters here. And at the end of, then again, we have the floods occur, and indeed there's outcry. Where would we draw the line, you think?
I like that you asked that question because you draw the line at the law. What does the law say? Can you actually settle in a wetland? I think that would be the reason why you're being evicted. Maybe the process is what we can question. But you draw the line on what the law says. That's where you draw the line.
Okay. Thank you. Then Umeme is leaving us. Umeme, they haven't spoken much about their green energy plans of adaptation. Are you happy that they are going?
No comment on that. I plead the fifth.
Plead the fifth. Okay. Any other questions from this one?
Yes.
Again, the treasurer.
Yes, I would like to make a follow-up on what Councillor Nangulu has said about. You have said that it's not good to be in the wetlands, but there is an issue that we normally call double standards. The everyday person is being evicted from the wetlands. But at the same time, we are seeing big companies. And moreover, they are being licensed by the government. Yeah, they are being licensed by the government to operate in wetlands. Isn't that a double standard? And how does Greenwatch respond to such issues? How has Greenwatch come up to really challenge such issues?
I would still bank on the law here. If you have double standards being operated where you have an everyday person being evicted and you have companies that have secured licenses to operate in what would like to call wetlands, how are those licenses issued? going back to the law. That's what I would point to. In terms of Greenwatch, there's the famous case of, is it Honorable Nyakana? In that case, Greenwatch actually applied to be added as a respondent in that matter so that we could provide scientific evidence, because we had actually carried out research on wetlands, their catchments, what one can do if your property ends up in a wetland. What would be the process of actually taking you out of that? So in such matters like that, we've also had jurisprudence on the issue of wetlands.
Okay, thank you for that answer. There's a question that I am being asked to read as far as... So I'll just move a bit closer just so that I can see it. Thanks, Council, for the Rnblive. My question goes to Samantha. It is trite that climate change affects us disproportionately, and the most affected is Omuntu Wawansi. Why then is it that every event meant to educate the public is taken to either Serena, Mistil, etc., which attracts only contributors which can't offer solutions that prejudice their vested interests?
Who are those who are taking events to Serena? Last week, us, Uganda Law Society, we were in Kasese, we were in Kisinga Town Council, actually speaking on the restoration of the riverbanks in Kasese. We were also in Bududa, talking to those communities about climate change. So I don't know, not all sensitization events are taken to Serena. Maybe for those policy makers and the like, where decisions are made at a higher level, I don't think they would appreciate being taken to the forest.
Okay, maybe lastly, on liability, it's good that you're a lawyer. The persons on the streets wander between themselves. Now, there is the employer whose employee hasn't come to work because of the floods. Then there is the employee also who has suffered the distress. People's cars were submerged. People's premises were submerged. You came out to say the Prime Minister was castigating the contractors. Who is liable in this equation? Who would bear responsibility?
I think in the KCCA Act, it states that one of their functions is maintenance of roads, infrastructure, drainage, and the like. The same Act also says that maintenance or construction of road is a responsibility of the central government.
Yes,
so you can dot the lines.
You can draw the lines between...
No, you can dot the line.
To know who is responsible.
Who's responsible? Who has the mandate according to the law?
Okay. I hope people get the answer. Indeed, there's homework to do. You must know which road it is and whether it is under central government. But I think largely within the city it is KCCA.
Yeah, but the same act also says central government. So okay. KCCA and central government.
Okay, thank you. I want to maybe pose the last question to Alan. Alan, I may have said unfairly that Umeme has no green policy and about the flood sit and what's going on. What are your thoughts generally?
I think I'm trying to figure, is your question within the context of Umeme or my own opinion?
Generally, you can, because somebody may say Umeme is also part of the pollution and that is why we are where we are. But anyway, just give us what is your position.
Okay, let me start with a bit of Umeme, because I'm not too sure I'm qualified to speak after an expert. Umeme undertook an environmental assessment of our network at the time when we were handing over. And the main questions were, do the transformers have, they still have dangerous chemicals? And they cleared us, of course. That is why we could hand over. I think because we actually are very active in the ESG space, and partly our financing came because we were paying attention to that. So the environment, social, and governance aspects of every utility, they must take care of the environment. So while electricity infrastructure can be potentially dangerous, it has evolved to such a point that we have new transformers that are cleaner. Our poles are treated with better chemicals than the creosote that we had in the past. And I think we are improving greatly, because you'll find a pole every 70 meters. If it's polluted, you'll have a problem. So we've done a lot in the last 20 years to improve the our environmental compliance. And our strong regulator actually has provided us financing to improve what we're doing. My thoughts on KCCA, I think, Samantha has been very, very clear. I'm not going to add anything there. I don't have any instructions to go after anyone there. With Umeme, we have a lot of strict liability when there's an issue on our network.
Yes.
So if a pole falls, hits somebody, the court will say, this person was hit, now the burden of proof has shifted.
Yes.
So I think there might be some actions in strict liability. Though I'm not too sure, maybe Samantha can clarify. Is it an act of God? Is it about caveira caused by human activity, or is it about maintenance? So is KCCA negligent, or is it also a victim of our activity?
Yes.
So those are the questions we may need to ask.
More questions than answers. Thank you thank you so much. We were supposed to have had a second speaker, Honorable Nalukola. He failed to make it due to matters beyond his control. So that would end this segment of the Flood City. I would want to thank everybody for their contribution. I want to thank Samantha for elaborately answering the questions. Let me hand back to the moderator.
All right, thank you very much, Eddie. Thank you very much, Samantha, and the team over here once again. Before I call upon Sam to give a vote of thanks and close this session for today, I'll just give a brief, our fourth estate usually want a summary in Luganda, and everything has been proceeding in English. I'm not going to reproduce everything that has been said. I'm just going to summarize for the Luganda listeners out there. Abatuuliriza, abatulaba abali eyo, tweyanze okuba nga muli ku mukutu mukyaliwo. Nga bulijjo bwe tujja wano mu Rnblive, tuba tugezaako okwatuusaako ensonga ez'enjawulo. Olwaleero mulabye abakungu nga boogera, twogedde ku nsonga za Umeme, engeri gye mwategedde nti Umeme yavuddewo ne tudda mu Uganda Electricity Distribution Company, UEDCL. Wabadde obweraliikirivu obw'amaanyi ennyo nga waliwo abantu abalooza nti amasannyalaze tujja kudda mu kizikiza, naye batukakasiza abakulu nti ekintu oba enkola eyo yakolebwako mu mateeka mu kukaanya neggwa bulungi ensonga lwaki n'amasannyalaze gakyaliwo tetuli mu nzikiza, wadde Umeme yawaayo obuweereza obwo mu UEDCL nga lumu omwezi guno ndowooza olwokubiri oluwedde. So singa waliwo obuvuyo ng'abantu abadde balowooza oba singa waliwo embeera egenda okwonooneka, tetwandibadde nga n'amasannyalaze tuli nago, twandibadde nga tuli mu kizikiza. So batukakasiza abakungu abakulu ababiri be tukyaziza olwaleero engeri gye byakolerwa mu mateeka n'engeri gye bigenda okutambula nga bigenda mu maaso. Ne Umeme nga kampani ekyaliwo wadde yavudde mu kuweereza amasannyalaze engeri gye badde eweereza. Ne tubeerera n'omukungu okuva mu UEDCL nga tunoonyera ku bintu by'amataba. Amateeka googera ki ekiviirako obuzibu, naki kye tuzaako oba ki kye tusobola okukola okugezaako okugyawo embeera eyo. Wadde badde mu lulimi Luzungu, abasinga muteeka okuba nga mubigoberedde. Era nga nzigalawo nziramu mu kusooka no nanyonyodde n'embeeyanza ne tubanyonya nti ffe nga Uganda Law Society tulina obuvunaanyizibwa eri omuntu wa bulijjo okulabika nti tubatuusaako ensonga naddala ezikootana n'amateeka n'obuwabuzi bwe tusobola okuwa nga buli muntu afune omukisa alina ensonga yenna abeere n'omukisa ogutugoberera era nembakunga nga nti buli omu abeera n'obuzibu abantu abalina ebizibu ebyenjawulo si nti buli nsonga zikwatagana n'ebyamateeka zigwera mu kkooti waliwo ensonga ezimu nga zeetaaga kye tuyita social justice nga ensonga zikosa buli muntu nga buli muntu alina okusitukiramu so ffe nga Uganda Law Society okuyita mu tteeka lyaffe ensonga lwaki tubawa omwaganyo guno wano embadde ntuddeawo nga tukyali wano era tufunye kye tuyita petition oba okusaba okuva mu abantu abamu abava mu abasiraamu nga nabo balina okwemulugunya nti engeri gye balonzeemu mufuti si bamativu baze mu Uganda Law Society naffe tubayambeko era tujjaba omukisa tuwulize ensonga zaabwe tuweeyo endowooza yaffe eri eggwanga oba bekikwatako nti ffe tulowooza kyandibadde kikolebwa bwe kiti oba twadressinga ensonga zaabwe n'olwekyo mwebale nnyo okubeera nga mutuwuliriza temutuuleyo ne musirika nga mulina ensonga mufanaza wamu temulina busobozi bugenda wabalooya ate waliwo n'ensonga ezimu nga si looya nga looya omu asobola okukola kyozihandolinga n'olw'ensonga eyo tweyanziza nnyo okuba nga mukyali naffe mpaka okutuuka essaawa zino. So at this juncture I'll invite our Western representative Sam to close the session officially. Sam. He's the most radical of the radical Umeme members here today.
Thank you so much, Vice President, Uganda Law Society. Thank you to my colleagues, the council members in the Radical Umeme, and I also thank the gallery for sparing time to come and attend this 12th Radical Umeme live session. Allow me extend our sincere gratitude to our guest speakers today. That is Mr. Rakakoko, Council, and Council Herod of ERA. At least we are assured that there will be continued and uninterrupted supply of electricity. Many of us who are on X, or formerly Twitter, were seeing a lot of panic talk of buy a lot of Yaka. Personally, I bought close to 100 units. I thought we would be in darkness. So I am glad that, that panic is no longer there. And indeed, we have continued flow of electricity. To Umeme, we can't thank you enough. I know it was a business for you, but for us it was a service, and you have left a mark on the power distribution within the country. I remember when we were growing up in Kabale, I don't know whether it's Umeme there or UEDCL, but we didn't have power in our village. But now I think we have power there because I saw poles and wires going up. So thank you for the good work you've done over the years. We also extend our sincere appreciation to Samantha for reminding us of the challenges we are facing with climate change. I know when we were at Makere, I remember studying environmental law, environment and the law. It's a course unit, I think, in third year or fourth year. One of the cases we read in that course unit was Greenwatch. So you must have been here for quite a number of years, because we learnt and studied from some of the cases you litigated in Greenwatch versus Attorney General, right to clean and safe environment. I don't remember the actual facts, but I remember that we read some of the cases that Greenwatch worked on. So thank you for the impact you're creating. Of course, I think I would propose that among some of the work you do is propose all integrate something on urban planning, because some of these challenges of floods have to do a lot with the way we plan our cities. The city where I come from, we've never experienced any floods because I think it was well planned by the former colonial masters. It's up to us now to either distort or improve on what or add on what they had planned, so that we do not have to suffer with the consequences of climate change. With that said, we send our regards from the President of ULS, His Excellency Isaac Semakade. He sends his regards, and you all heard the message that came from the council position on the delayed, handling of cases where he is involved and where Uganda Law Society is involved. Of course, it has not been a smooth sail because in one way or another we are incapacitated by the delayed resolution of these legal matters. So we hope that the message has reached the intended recipients and action will be taken on that. With that said, we thank you so much for being here with us. And please, when we call you again on the next Rnblive, please spare time and come. Thank you so much, and enjoy your lunch.
Can we have a photo moment for the guests? No apology.